Committee meeting is now called to order. Ashley, will you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Stevens. Present. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also like the
Excellent.
record to reflect that Councilman Miller is also in attendance.
Excellent. Excellent. Ashley, has anyone signed in for public comment?
Yes, Ms. Martin.
Ms. Martin, if you would come forward. Good morning.
Housing Director for the City of South Euclid. I'm also the Chair of the Executive Committee of the Greater Cleveland Reinvestment Coalition. So first, I just want to applaud you for taking a leadership position with this banking services contract. According to the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, you're the first county that's done this. So you should be proud. You're taking a leadership role. There are 13 community commitments that were outlined in the banking services contract under Exhibit 4. We're very, very pleased because these are many of the points of advocacy that the GCRC was trying to make over the past several years. And one in particular I want to bring up because it's personal to the City of South Euclid, and that's the Challenge Loan Fund. We in South Euclid have been attempting to work with the Home Repair Resource Center for the past 10 years to roll out a challenge loan in South Euclid. And we have not been able to get the bank on board with this. So we've had meeting after meeting with the bank, and so the fact that you were able to do this is phenomenal. The one thing I would say to you, however, is that it's a little vague, and there's many nuances about the challenge loan that need to be fleshed out very carefully. Otherwise, it could end up being a meaningless concession. For one thing, loan loss reserve, there has to be a pot of money attached to it. And KeyBank currently requires a 100% match on all the loans. And that's an extreme match considering they have a 4% default rate in Cleveland Heights over the past 50 years that they've had the product. So we'd love to see that negotiated to be a little bit more favorable so that we could stretch the funds a little bit more. And where are the pot of funds going to come from? That would be the other question. And the third question would be housing counseling agencies, which play an integral role in the rollout of this, which would require, the reason it doesn't default on these loans is because there's so much hand-holding. They help them find contractors. They help them with the bids. They help them make sure this stuff's getting done. They provide the funding to the contractors. The consumer doesn't get the money goes right to the contractors. So that has to be paid for somehow. So I would just urge you to make sure those details are hammered down, but really this is a true victory for you, and I'm very, very grateful that you've taken this approach. We're proud of our county. And I'd also like to say that you have something on the agenda about the down payment program, and South Euclid residents have really benefited from the county's down payment assistance program, and we're very pleased to be working with CHN Housing Partners, and they've done a remarkable job for us. They came to our library a couple weeks ago and had a beautiful session for several hours at our library. It was very well attended, so I think you're in good hands. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Are there any other speakers, Ashley?
Yes, Ms. Liu.
Ms. Liu, please.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. This is a good step for the whole community. Of course, so many little communities within this big community will have help. However, as I said before, we have been racing with the time. Some of these improvements will not actually kick in quickly enough, so even for the people trying to apply, for example, home repairing loans, they're little repairing by the time the whole program can actually get implemented properly and kicked in to carry out its purpose. Some of the little ones, problems in the houses will become bigger ones already. This is part of the reason why our homeless population has been increased, especially seniors. Senior citizens, they worked hard for their whole life. Finally, they could pay off the mortgage, own their little properties. But property gets old. The tax on the property also got increased. So it's very difficult for people to catch up with all these obstacles. But this is a big step if we can encourage all banks to do the same, to help out, that will be good. In that case, not just one particular community in our big community can benefit from this. That will be all other seriously delayed and behind communities, they can catch up finally. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liu.
Travell Harp.
Hello, Council. I'm so happy to be here today. This is, we're coming to our anniversary. I don't know if you guys recalled, back April 15th of 2019, you guys came to East Cleveland to talk about grocery store access in East Cleveland. And since that time, we've met with Pernell Jones, Dale Miller, and Cheryl Stevens, who's, Cheryl actually took, became our champion and helped draft an opportunity for us to actually help ourselves in our own community and everything. And so we appreciate that. We're going to be here for the duration of this committee meeting if you guys have any questions, but we're so honored and privileged to really have your support. And I just like to acknowledge East Cleveland residents that came along with me. Could you guys stand for a second? Yeah. So we're in full support. We're very appreciative of Cheryl Stevens and her work and really like help us draft out a proposal to really help us build capacity for organization as a community development corporation in East Cleveland, which is new territory for us, as well as implement a high quality grocery store in East Cleveland. So thank you so much. I'll be here for questions if you guys have any about the proposal.
Thank you.
Hank Smith.
Hello. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak up here today. And I'd like to say thank you to Councilwoman Cheryl Stevens for the work she's done in helping us put this whole thing together for the grocery stores. We in East Cleveland have not had a decent grocery store for many years. But now we're at a time where we have a great organization like NOAA that's helping move this initiative forward. And then we have a new mayor and a new council that's really working together to help us, help the community. The administration is working with the community, and we really need a grocery store in our community. I've seen a couple of the other ones that did not do very well, but I know that in the right location in East Cleveland, this grocery store will be well received. So I just want to thank you again for allowing me to come up here and speak on it. We have a lot of seniors in East Cleveland. They can't get very far outside the city. So we are asking for the help of the county council to help our people in East Cleveland. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last speaker we have is Frank Ford.
Hello, Frank Ford, Western Reserve Land Conservancy. I just wanted to speak briefly about the KeyBank contract. As Sally Martin said, I believe this is the first time a county government in the country has used its banking contract to leverage improved banking services and lending for underserved communities. There are some cities that have done it, but I don't believe any other county. So county government really should be commended. And specifically, the leadership of Executive Budish and Treasurer Murray. I had met with them, and I know that they took recommendations that were given to them from the community and really acted on those. I guess I do agree with some of Sally's comments as well, though, that there are some details that still would be good if they were worked out, specifically that home repair commitment, which is really a major victory for KeyBank to do that. But there is a question about where will the money come from for a loan loss reserve to expand the existing program, which has a loan loss reserve, but if it expands significantly, it would need funding for that, and then funding for the counseling that goes with that. But notwithstanding that, this is a huge step forward for the county, and county government is to be commended for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Public comments?
No one else has signed in.
All right. Well, at this time, I'd like a motion for the approval of our February 3rd minutes. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Our minutes are approved. Well, we have two items here today, and for the sake of our visitors on Cleveland Housing Network, we're going to go to contract item B first. Ashley, if you would read item B into the record.
Resolution number 2020-0058, making an award on requisition number 43203 to CHN Housing Capital in the amount not to exceed $679,461 for administration of the Down Payment Assistance Program in Cuyahoga Urban County Communities and City of Parma for the period 1/1/2020 to December 31st, 2021.
Sarah, if you'd like to speak to this matter.
Good morning, Sarah Parks Jackson with the Department of Development. This is an RFP that we issue periodically for the administration of our down payment assistance program, which is funded with federal home dollars. In the past, some of you may be aware that Neighborhood Housing Services of Greater Cleveland served as the administrator of this program for us for years and did a great job. Over the summer, there was a merger between NHS and CHN, so this is why you see the contract is now with CHN Housing Capital. I have with me today Kevin Nowak, who is the CEO of CHN Housing Partners, and Pat Kinney, who is the COO, and they'd like to say a few words.
Hello, Council.
If you would say your names once again.
Sure. Kevin Nowak, Executive Director, CHN, CEO of CHN Housing Capital.
Pat Kenny, COO, CHN Housing Partners.
Thank you for having us today.
Welcome.
I think most of you know CHN Housing Partners. We serve 30,000 unduplicated clients, most of those residing in Cuyahoga County. Back in 2016, we began the process of creating a lending entity that was intended to serve the areas within Cuyahoga County that otherwise are not being served by traditional banking. So low to moderate income areas, low to moderate income people, and really trying to focus too on our minority communities that have been disproportionately impacted by Dodd-Frank. At the end of 2018, NHS, Greater Cleveland's board, approached us. They were running into some financial difficulty as well as kind of governing difficulty, and they asked us to consider consolidating our companies to really try to continue the mission of NHS within Cuyahoga County and the Greater Cleveland area, and that fit nicely with what CHN was otherwise trying to accomplish. Through our lending efforts, we're intending this spring to be going live with first mortgage lending throughout Cuyahoga County to address both the credit issues that we see within our county as well as under $50,000 mortgages. Pairing that along with the down payment assistance and other products that NHS had on its balance sheet and lending availability creates a nice countywide comprehensive alternative credit model that we believe will help to drive further credit throughout Cuyahoga County.
Excellent.
And for the down payment assistance program, as you know, as Sarah indicated, it's the same down payment assistance that the county has really produced. In summary, really, at this point, it's a 10% down payment. Customers need to have 3% of their own money into the deal. It is a soft second mortgage onto the property, and it's due and payable upon resale. So typically, we'll be administering this as just an extension of what Neighborhood Housing Service has had, and really as the county program has been doing across the board. Typically, what we'll do is we're partnering with, as Sally indicated from South Euclid, we're partnering with any and all municipalities, community development, economic development organizations who are looking to, bolster more lending within their community. Realtors, realtists, lending institutions, community development organizations. We're doing a big website and marketing campaign throughout our own efforts too. So, we're really just trying to pick up the great work that's already been done and continuing it on. And like Kevin says, it'll work very well with various lending institutions, their loan portfolio packages, as well as our own individual one we have.
Thank you. How many individuals have you served over the years, or how you qualified, how you like?
Sure. So on the lending side, starting in 2008, when the economy fell out for everyone, it particularly fell out for low and moderate income people, we're the organization that's done the most single-family lease purchase projects through the low-income housing tax credit program. So we had a pipeline of hundreds of families that otherwise were running into an issue to be able to buy their homes. Starting at that point in time, we received capital from financial institution, Cuyahoga Land Bank, as well as Ohio Housing Finance Agency, to capitalize a loan fund to continue serving our low and moderate income families in our housing to do lending. So since then, we've done over 700 loans, which is over $7 million in loan balances that we've originated to our families. We have a 99% success rate of our families maintaining their home ownership for 5 years after they become a homeowner, and that's in part because of the lending products that we've created. The underwriting to that was based upon alternative credit criteria that as a nonprofit lender we're able to develop that's hard for banks to be able to utilize. And in particular, we use something we call the equivalency principle, which was as long as someone had a proven ability to pay and had paid their rent on time in full for 24 to 36 months prior to the time that we originated the loan, then we would originate a loan to them at that amount, which would be if their equivalent rent was $600, then their principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is $600. We have found that underwriting metric works well.
Could you share where the concentration of those 700 individuals were across the county? Give us a sense, just a sense.
Sure. So those have been in Cleveland. Yep. But if you look at CHN broadly through CHN Housing Partners, we have countywide contracts kind of across the board. We're one of the heat providers. We're the largest weatherization provider in Northeast Ohio. So we reach countywide. We have offices in Euclid, Maple Heights, kind of beyond the city as well. And we're looking at. We were actually asked by the state of Ohio to ask for an increase in HEAP to be able to further deploy those dollars for utility assistance in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County.
Great. At this time, let me open it up to my colleagues. Are there any questions? No questions.
Thank you.
You got off easy. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
All right. Well, at this moment, Sarah, did you have any comments? Any questions?
My only comment would be that since NHS of Greater Cleveland is now part of CHN, if this committee would like a full briefing from CHN Housing Capital on all the products that they have, including the contracts that they have with the county and what they're doing on their own, we'd be more than happy to work with staff to arrange that briefing for you.
Let's have that conversation. Yes.
I do have one more question.
Councilwoman?
To the chair, to Ms. Parks Jackson. How difficult is it for new communities to become part of Cleveland Housing Network's programming? Because we know that the program, the down payment assistance, has been focused in a couple of communities. How difficult is it to expand? Because only two of my communities have been participating in the program.
To the chair, to the councilwoman, the entitlement communities of Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, East Cleveland, Euclid, Lakewood, we're excluding Parma because they put their home money in. If they get home money directly, they cannot participate in our down payment assistance program.
I believe the suburban communities entered into a collaborative activity. So if the collaboration would put money into the fund, then they would all be able to participate?
If it's their if they're part of our home consortium, as
That's
Parma
the right word, I
is.
forgot.
Yeah.
Consortium.
Right.
If
As
the
Parma
consortium
is.
in general put in, as opposed to just Parma's portion, would the other entitlement communities be able to participate?
Yes. If they would have to become part of the home consortium, but definitely yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman?
Thank you. Just a brief question, and I hope this wasn't asked. So is this typically an annual contract where we go out to, with the request for proposal? Is this usually a 12-month contract?
To Councilwoman, generally, yes, but what we found out is just historically, we need to take it out longer just because of the process of purchasing a home and people getting their financing together, and the length of time that takes sometimes for folks, so that the organization would have the money to expend properly and we don't leave anybody behind.
Councilman Miller?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Jackson, this contract was supposed to begin on January 1, 2020. Have any services been provided so far, or is that on hold until we take action on this?
And Chair, to the councilman, that is essentially on hold. I'm sure that CHN Housing Capital has some clients that will be ready to go as soon as we receive approval, so that administrative cost, if they have done that, is incurred by them, and then when the contract is approved, then we can move forward with paying administrative costs that are associated with our program.
Any further questions? If not, I'll make a motion that we send this to the full council under 3 reading suspension.
Yes, please.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, it is recommended to the full council.
Thank you.
At this time, Ashley, if you would read our next item into the record.
Resolution number 2020-0057, making an award on requisition number 45609 to Key Bank National Association in the amount not to exceed $3,200,000 for banking and treasury services for the period April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2024.
Good morning, Chairman Jones and members of the committee. Chris Murray, County Treasurer, and I'm pleased to submit this legislation for your approval. As you know, ORC 321.03 provides the authority for County Treasurer to submit to the legislature an agreement with the financial institution to receive and process payments to the county. To that end, I am presenting this agreement for RFP 45609 with Key Bank. With council approval, Key Bank will supply our banking needs for the next 4 years. In addition, this agreement will cover the county's professional travel services as well as the procurement card program. And the award covers April 1st of 20 through March 31st of 2024. And if the committee will indulge me for a few minutes, I'd like to briefly discuss the selection process, the financial impact of the agreement, as well as the basis for the selection of Key Bank. In terms of the process, the RFP was issued June 13th, 2019, and the proposals were received on July 10th, 2019. The banks, which are 6 of them, were scored with the following criteria in order of highest points to lowest points: individual banking services, pricing, the corporate travel program, the procurement travel program, custodian services, and finally, provider background. Key Bank was chosen among a group of 6 banks, including PNC, Huntington, JP Morgan, US Bank, and Dollar Bank. The notice of intent to award was submitted to all participating vendors on October 28th, 2019. During the negotiation period with Key, the county approached them with the idea of documenting community benefits that are in the planning or implementation stage. Key Bank was also receptive to some of the recommendations proposed by local housing stakeholders, as you've already heard. The community commitments in this agreement reflect the aims of our discussions with the goal of moving LMI communities forward. In terms of financial impact of the agreement, as you can see, it is approximately $800,000, not to exceed $800,000 a year. The P cards, travel, and banking fees are listed separately in the agreement. And in terms of the basis for the recommendation, there are 3 main areas I like to talk about. First is price point. Key Bank fees show that they are approximately $2,000 less than the next lowest bid. Number 2, Key is directly involved with the implementation of the ERP and the real property system, which, as you know, are critical operations that the county is undertaking. And just to give you an example of the commitment that Key has provided, we had an issue with pushing out approximately $800 million in payments. Key worked with us, this was just last week. Key worked with us to get the payments out to the taxing authorities. They worked through the weekend. So I just wanted to just give you an example of the commitment that our partner has provided to the county thus far. Key Bank, as I've been in front of the committee before, as you may recall, Key Bank is providing a solution for a replacement for our third-party vendor for credit cards as well. And finally, Key Bank has a local lockbox feature in their operation, and the lockbox, in terms of layman's terms, Key takes approximately 85 to 90% of our property tax payments, and they process them at their facility, so we can keep a small staff here. That local lockbox feature is critical for us because when we're in the process of preparing tax bills, those tax bills have to be prepared on paper by a third-party vendor based on Ohio law. Once those bills are created by the third-party vendor, we then have to get those bills to Key Bank so that they can ensure that the bills are run through their remittance machines. Any delay in that would be a critical service loss for the county. And Key is the only one of the respondent banks that has a local lockbox. In conclusion, Key Bank has the competitive advantages that I've just discussed, which will make them the recommended choice for the next 4 years. Key Bank is here to answer any questions, as well as the Department of Development for anything pertaining to the community commitments. Do you have any questions?
Any question from the committee? Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Murray, first of all, congratulations. I know you guys have been working on this a long time, and
thank you.
I want to commend you for your work. Could you just respond a little bit to Sally Martin, South Euclid, and whether there's enough teeth in this legislation, or what's your view of that?
First of all, I would say thank you, Sally, for the accolade. But seriously, what I would say is that at this point, I would agree that there are details that are missing with the key community agreements. It's a multi-step process, and so this is going to take some coordination with other county agencies, as well as some discussion with Key and any other community organizations that may be a part of the goals that we have. So I cannot dispute that. It's going to take some time, but I think this is a critical first step for the county.
And you're committed to pursuing
exactly
that. Okay, thank you for right now.
Councilwoman Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the treasurer, as you know, I echo Ms. Martin's perspectives. I think I impressed you enough with my concerns. One of the things I would strongly recommend is that we create a reporting mechanism so that we don't get to the end of the agreement and it is in essence one of those, oops, my bad, we didn't achieve anything. So I'd like to see you write in, and as you know, I'll be willing to chip in my $1.99 of opinion on how we could receive recording either quarterly or semi-annually at the minimum, so that we understand what the bank is capable of achieving on those 12 items, if not more, so that we actually see impact in our communities. One of the things I said to the treasurer last week is it is incredibly important for those who have financial relationships with us that are lenders to look at how, if they were looking at a business, they'd be looking at how the business makes their money. And our primary income stream is tax dollars. And so when they are doing more in our communities and neighborhoods to help homeowners reinvest in their properties so that those properties are valued higher, then our primary product, homes, has increased value, which generates an increased income for us and means that we go out for property tax increases rarely, that we can reduce how much any increase for a health and human services levy might be, because when the value of these properties increases, our primary income stream increases. And he shook his head and he agreed. And he reminded me that my degree was in something besides business administration, since we went to the same university.
Respectfully.
But at any rate, that's why the quarterly or semi-annual reports are important, so that we can see what the bank does right and encourage them to do better if there's a misunderstanding about one of these elements. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Miller?
Mr. Chairman, to the treasurer, you said that the Key Bank fees proposed were $2,000 less than the lowest. Can you tell me what the total fees were that were proposed by each of the applicants?
Yes, I can. So what I'm going to just talk about is the average fees for each bank per their proposal. And Key was approximately a little under $15,000 per month. JP Morgan was $16,000. PNC was $20,000. Huntington was $29,000. And the last two banks did not submit a bid because they did not submit fees because their response was essentially for a small portion of the RFP. So just in terms of dollars and cents, we felt that Key made a strong proposal.
Okay. Second question is, you mentioned about the payments to the taxing authorities. We've also had a problem with the payments to the guardian ad litem providers. Can you tell me if that issue has been resolved?
No, I do not, Councilman, because I'm not sure if the issue was input from the originating department or if there was an issue with ERP. That I cannot tell you. I can certainly find out.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman?
So what exactly is the time frame to get the details? I mean, I know you're working on it. We're going to authorize you to proceed, but what is the timeline, and any reasonable commitment with some financial dollars behind this on the table? 2 questions.
The answer to those questions is we have not discussed timetable yet, nor funding. I think we need to discuss that. I would like to discuss that with the Department of Development as to ways that we can possibly fund some of the initiatives, but we have not discussed the time frame in terms of landing some of these commitments yet.
So I understand this makes sense to go with Key Bank from the factors you presented to us, from the different aspects that we're looking to, but how are the other vendors in relation to the commitment to provide these other facets, the community investment and lending? Okay. And that's the main gist of what we've been waiting to achieve.
Councilwoman, the RFP was incredibly strict as to the factors that we used to make the selection. So the RFP, if you go back to my comments about the individual criteria, 45% of the RFP score was on actual banking services. So that's almost half of the agreement. Didn't have anything to do with community commitments.
No, but what about some detail under that? I mean, I understand there is a higher score, but what was the discrepancy between and among the Key and the other responders? Was it vast? What do you know?
For each individual score?
Just how Key did in relation to the other responders.
Well, one of the major differentiators was the retail lockbox. The other respondents did not have a local lockbox, which is crucial for my operation semi-annually. I need to be able to take care of that. if I will recall, I'm looking at my cash manager here. I believe the web services scores were better. The image cashiering letter was better. I'm trying to think. Can you come up just for a second? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Patrice Brooks. I'm the Investment and Cash Management Officer for the county. Chris Murray and I worked very hard to score all these proposals, and so we do have them broken down by bank per category. So I'm not sure I understood your question, but
I was more looking at the community, the response of the community's need for lending and that part of it. I understand what we are,
Okay.
what we need. We need a
I understand.
lockbox. I understood that part.
Okay.
But what I don't understand is the disparity in the detail from KeyBank and the other responders. Like how different were they in that category?
Well, let me say this, in terms of process, the RFP scores were gathered, totaled, and we made an assessment based on the RFP. The community commitments were things that we talked about after Key was already awarded the contract. So I don't have a differentiator between Key and the other banks for the community commitments. These are some things that we talked about during the negotiation period.
Okay.
So, well, Chris, let me just interject. To that point, I've been waiting for this contract, as you know, but it appears when we had the actual conversation, the RFP had already gone out.
Correct.
Key Bank was awarded. So my lobbying of you for these action items did occur strictly with Key Bank, so it was not factored in with the others. So that is the logistics of how we got to where we are. So Key Bank is certainly a strong partner. We're looking forward to working with them closely. I'll just share this. I'll go back. The reason this has been such a commitment on my part is, as Ms. Sally Martin mentioned earlier, cities have done this. That's my experience. The city of Cleveland did this back in the 90s, Mayor Michael R. White. And he literally said, banks, if you don't lend to the residents of this community, then we will not put their tax dollars with you. It became a national model. It benefited my family business, and that resonated with me before I ever was in elected office, to know that my government could have a positive impact on the private sector for the benefit of the residents of this community. So I came into office knowing this was something I wanted to do, not to use a stick, so to speak, but a carrot of partnership and working together. So that is what I see here. I'm taking in the comments that are made, and I want everyone to know, again, this contract comes up how often?
Every 4 years.
4 years. So we want to make this systemic. We want to improve. We want the other banks to know. Okay? It may be a factor in the future. We'll see. Okay? But this will not be a one-shot, one-off time. And we want the community to know that their benefits should be given back to the residents whose dollars they hold. So we definitely want to continue this conversation. I have one question. I'll get to you. One moment, Cheryl. In the language of the contract, the 13 action items, I would like you to discuss them for us, just so that we have them on record. But in the contract, are the 13 action items mandatory, or are they? Is there a may or a shall language in the contract?
Well, they are commitments that we've discussed. Now, I think to Councilwoman Stevens' point, what we want to do is we want to bring our partner along slowly, because this is a major step for them, and I commend them for what they have discussed with the county. I look at these as goals. And so there's no language that says within the contract itself that if you don't hit this particular benchmark, that there will be issues with the contract. That's not the way the contract has been devised, nor was that our aim. If I'm answering your question.
Right. Not holding them obviously to the goals, but the commitment to the actions. We
Correct.
certainly want to measure the outcome and get metrics.
Certainly.
As Cheryl Stevens has said, we want to measure metrics and not holding them accountable, so to speak, for those outcomes, but commitment to the action themselves. Will they be taking the action? And is it, in the language, is it mandatory or is it optional on their part?
Well,
Or is the language just tend to say may or shall?
The language of the contract says that Key will put forth its best efforts to hit these commitments.
So at this point, it's best effort.
Correct.
Okay.
And in terms to, if I could just make one comment about your issue with scoring and keeping them accountable. Key has, if you'll see in the commitments, they have agreed to provide their raw loan application data, which will help us to inform any decisions that we need to make in terms of public policy, investments in the community. They have been transparent with us. They've agreed to be transparent with us in terms of what's working and what's not working. And again, this is a partnership. It's going to take us some time to get to the optimal community service level that we all want to see. But I think this is a huge step.
I agree. Councilwoman Stevens.
Is there someone from Key who can address this issue?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Eric Fiala. I'm the Director of Corporate Community Initiatives and Relations at Key, and have been part of the conversations with the county on constructing these commitments. And I would say, we are certainly prepared to share progress with the council on a regular basis. I think the other thing I would have you know in terms of timing, while we have not put a specific timeline in place, I would envision that's something that happens as we continue to work through these commitments. The other thing I would have you know is that many of the things that we're talking about are things that we already have in process. And so I think where you're thinking the lead time might be a little bit longer, we may see some of those shortened given that we've really been focused on our commitment in Cleveland and how to accelerate impact. So I think some sooner than later we could give commitments around timing and some of the details, but then certainly could provide that transparency over time.
So one of the things that causes me personally, and maybe some of my other colleagues, is that we recently received a report from Thriving Communities that talked about where the primary lenders in this marketplace were in doing some forms of community engagement and lending. And unfortunately, while Key had some of the largest deposits, and I talked with one of your senior officers who talked to me about the fact that there were corporate assets mixed with some of our residential assets. We still saw other lenders achieve more in the community development area. And so since you are really good at this business development piece, we need you to get better at the community development piece.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I think one thing I would share with you around the lending, I'm not sure of the time period you're looking through, but we in 2016 purchased First Niagara Bank, which is when we brought back in-house our mortgage underwriting and servicing capabilities, and had planned for that business to ramp up very quickly. That ramp up took longer than we expected. And so I'm just going to look at my notes here to give you some numbers. But in 2017, here in Cleveland, we provided about $20 million in mortgages to LMI individuals and in LMI communities. In 2018, that doubled to nearly $40 million. And I can tell you in 2019, I don't have full year data yet, but through the third quarter, we were in the mid-30s. So we have seen a material ramp in our mortgage production given that capability, and I think you would see that continue. The other thing I would add is specifically around small business lending. We are planning to expand our SBA Express business, which we would expect to see a material increase in volume, which I think you see reflected in that commitment based on opening up that product line.
Understanding that you're not the final answer, you heard me talk about quarterly or semi-annual reporting so that we don't get to the end of the 4 years and we're no longer friends or willing to be partners.
Sure.
So we really do need for you to understand the commitment to provide us with data on a regular basis so that if it's something we can help you achieve, or there's something that in banking regulations that prohibits something we thought was a great idea.
Sure.
that we know about it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, these set of commitments require a lot of investment from Key. And so we are just as interested in the performance of those to make sure that the investments we're making have the intended outcomes too. So we'd be happy to share that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions from the committee? Can you take a moment and read into the record the 13 action items so that we have them?
Yes, I can. These will be the community commitments from Key Bank. Number one, Key Bank will work with the county to solve the issue that arises when real property does not qualify for a Key community mortgage loan of $50,000 or less because it does not appraise for its purchase price. Key Bank will consider the use of a loan loss guarantee fund to fill the gap. Number two, Key Bank will seek approvals from CHN Housing Partners and Fannie Mae to extend its Home Ready Mortgage program throughout Cuyahoga County. Key Bank's Home Ready Mortgage program allows up to 125% combined loan to value and currently serves borrowers in the city of Cleveland. Number three, Key Bank will help draft legislation that adjusts appraisal standards to create additional opportunities for low and moderate income borrowers. Number four, Key Bank will provide the county with loan application register, raw performance data prior to the data being published. Number five, Key Bank will encourage loan officers to make more LMI loans by increasing minimum per unit payments and providing additional incentive compensation. Number six, Key Bank will reduce loan transaction fees on original loans of less than $150,000 and on all refinancing. Number seven, Key Bank will work with CHN Housing Partners in an effort to fund a new community development financial institution. Number eight, Key Bank will continue to participate in the HELP program and will consider adjusting lending standards and incentive rates for unsecured loans to the same as for secured loans. Number nine, Key Bank will participate in the Challenge program and extend it throughout the county. Number 10, Key Bank will provide an affordable alternative to payday check cashing operations. Number 11, Key Bank will commit to increasing the $22 million of SBA loans to LMI small businesses it made in 2019 by 20% in 2020. Number 12, Key Bank will provide a community reinvestment fund to provide a second chance for denied SBA applicants. And number 13, Key Bank will partner with the county in providing a series of community programs addressing financial literacy and education. At least one such program will be directed toward children aging out of foster care.
One question, the CDFI, the creation, will that be a creation of a new CDFI or a partnership with an existing community development financial institution? Give us some insight into what that looks like to Key.
Paul?
You may want to call on Kevin, who's still here.
Yeah, very true. Just left.
So, excuse me, Paul Hertig, Department of Development. Members of council, we've been advised by Kevin, the director of CHN, that he's working towards the CDFI. We would defer to his statements as to his exact status in that process and would not want to speak for him in this matter.
It can hold. Okay. Any further questions from the committee?
No.
Right. Okay. Well, again, I just want to thank you, Chris Murray, for your work on this, and again, all parties involved. As I said, it is a first, but this isn't the first time we've done a first. So again, we just want to thank you again for all of your work. So at this time, I'm going to, if any other comments, not, we're going to make a motion to move this resolution to the full council under second reading suspension.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Definitely. I've just been advised by the council president I should add my name. So let's do that. We'll add my name to this piece of legislation. At this time, we are going to have
Mr.
a discussion
Mr. President?
for our East Cleveland Support Development Model. And Councilman Miller?
May I also have my name added, please?
Heard anyone else?
Yes.
If you saw the hand and a quiet whisper from our council president says he is in support as well. All right. All right, if we're all set, we'll now go to our discussion, our East Cleveland discussion. If someone would like to speak to this matter.
I can start us off, and I'm going to ask Khalil Sarin from staff to come forward. Before I was sworn in November of 2018, the staff at NOAA reached out to me and asked me to begin to pay attention to their endeavors to collaborate with the Board of Health and the Department of Development on access to healthy food in the city of East Cleveland. In the community development and economic development vernacular, they have what is known as a food desert. Nowhere inside the city boundaries is a full-service grocery store that provides them with direct access to fresh, healthy vegetables, to meats with a quality of cuts that many of us in suburban communities or in what have become preferred neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland have seen. And so after years of working on their own, they found partnerships with the Board of Health. And the Board of Health has been working with them, and I want to recognize the director and the staff at the Board of Health for continuing to provide support on behalf of all of us to one of our communities that has seen disinvestment consistently from all types of businesses and finally food service businesses. It became very clear to me that this would be something that would take a lot of time from multiple departments and members of council. And then mid-year last year, several of my colleagues, specifically Councilman Miller and Councilwoman Conwell, as well as you, Council Committee Chair and Vice President of Council, Mr. Jones, you attended a session where they made it clear that their community needed better support from us in order to achieve this goal. And so in working with council staff, we have come up with a proposal. I may have, for the first time in a while, been the person who had the smartest answers for how we move forward, but it's simply because of my career. It's not because of any other reason. And several times I have been the lead person on helping to eliminate food deserts, both in Cuyahoga County and in Summit County. So with that, Khalil will present to you what we collaboratively came up with as a three-pronged approach that can serve as a model for other things that we need to do in community and economic development. Help people train and build capacity, help them understand the market they're about to move into and who to reach out to deliver an item, and finally how we might actually help them finance things, because even though this is the government side of the table, to use that old concept of instead of giving folks a fish, we teach them to fish for themselves. And I'm hoping this model will be be able to use it for other communities, for other neighborhood groups. And with that, I'd like to ask Khalil to go into a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Councilwoman. My name is Khalil Sarin, County Council staff. I apologize for my voice. I'm a little bit under the weather still. As many of you know, I was out most of last week. So just to jump right into it, for a little bit of background, and this was before the Councilwoman's tenure, there was quite a bit of demand at a certain point for funding for grocery store projects, all sort of at the same time, we were receiving several requests for our participation in a few different projects. And at that time, the county didn't have any particular product for incentives or for support for that kind of project. And so there was a bit of a time frame where the county didn't know what it could do to support sort of the elimination of food deserts and grocery store projects in general. So at that time, I sort of wrote a draft, program policy that could potentially have been used to support these kinds of products or projects. It was a community wellness development grant loan program, and the cap for the grant was something around $500,000. At least it was envisioned in that way. And it was specifically for construction and equipment of the grocery store projects or other community wellness amenities that some communities are lacking, and as a result of market forces not necessarily directing these sorts of activities to those communities. So at that time, like I said, there were several projects that were requesting support. One of the projects that we ended up supporting was the East Side Market Project. We provided them with construction and equipment funding, and they are up and running and doing work in that community. And this was a grant to NEON, the healthcare organization that did this. And so one of the other projects that we had been asked to consider, that the Department of Development specifically was asked to consider, was a grocery store project on Buckeye. There was, I believe, a Giant Eagle that left that location, and the community was trying to get another grocery store, full service grocery store in that space to serve that community. And ultimately, the county did not move forward with contributing to that project, but that project and another project before it in the city of Euclid sort of helped to provide the kernel of a model for us. It was their model. The Board of Health worked to include the community in the development of these grocery stores, and the model has shown itself to be very successful. The community then supports those grocery stores in a very wholehearted way because the grocery store development took their needs into account, and the community felt they were a part of the development of that grocery store. And so that model has been successful both in meeting the needs of the community and meeting the needs of the grocery store operator, as far as I can tell up to this point. So the county council staff has had conversations back and forth with the Board of Health about this model and how we could potentially work together to make it more sustainable and expand it to other communities that need this kind of service in this kind of amenity. So in working with Councilwoman Stevens and with NOAA, the Northeast Ohio Alliance for Hope, we all came together, had these conversations, and came up with a model, as we discussed earlier. And this model is a multiple stage, sort of a community development. It could be a model that could be expanded to other communities as well, incorporating fledgling community development corporations into the development of, it could be grocery stores in another community, it might be another need. But the idea is to start with the capacity within the community and help to build that up through capacity building, organizational support, operational support rather, and access to technical assistance. And when we say capacity building, we mean things like training, development training, real estate development training, economic development training, so that when these projects get up and running, the organizations that are in those communities can take it over and reliably take it over and be the driver of these projects, as opposed to sort of a passenger that's receiving assistance, as opposed to receiving collaboration and then moving forward with it and moving the ball on their own. So that first step would be that operational support and capacity building piece. The second step in this case would be specific project preparatory work that would include things like feasibility studies, site selection assistance, market studies, preliminary project design work. It could also include that community inclusion in terms of what services are actually needed, what sorts of things would the community support in the model that the Board of Health has shown to be very successful. And then stage 3 would be the project itself, the design and construction of the project itself. Also the design of the finance stack, the capital stack that would help to fill out the construction and design funding. So, and then of course the last step that sort of isn't included in this is the operation as well, and the design of the operation would go into that as well. So that's sort of a quick breakdown. If there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to field them. And we also have Roger Sykes from the Board of Health and Travell Harp from NOAA, who can respond to questions specific to their organizations and the piece that they would play.
Are there any comments? Sunny?
I have a question about, I guess it's a Board of Health question. I know the Planning Commission mapped out the desert locations and the Board of Health took it from there. But when you say it's successful, I wanted to hear the feedback on the projects and how you account for the success.
Okay, Roger, if you'd like to speak to that a bit.
And that side of Giant Eagle in the city of Cleveland, what happened with that?
The Simons over on Buckeye.
Right. Good morning. My name is Roger Sykes. I work at the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. I've been involved in the different supermarket projects, largely in Euclid. I was very involved with the Simon supermarket there. And then providing also some support for the project over in the Buckeye neighborhood in Cleveland. In terms of how we measure success, well, one, I'll say that the supermarket process that we've engaged in, it hasn't been all, there's certainly been challenges, with those projects. I think what's been very successful is like the participation that we've had from residents. So for example, in the city of Euclid, over 600 residents have been involved with bringing that supermarket to the city. So they've come out for forums to share what their priorities would be in terms of quality that the supermarket would bring. So in Euclid, that was they wanted automatic carts at the grocery store. They wanted to solve stormwater drainage issues on the properties. They wanted to improve lighting. They wanted a better parking lot. And so this feedback was taken and given to the store owner as well as the city of Euclid to make sure that it got implemented. And so the things that I listed, those were implemented, those were successes. And I think what we saw is that when residents saw in Euclid their feedback being met, that helped build unity around the process. And so far in Euclid, the store's been stable. Revenues have been solid. And so, for example, in their first year of operation, they sold about $400,000 worth of produce at that supermarket location. Whereas before, there was an empty building. And in addition, the businesses surrounding that supermarket, they were about 50% empty, and now we've seen more of those units being occupied. So I think the stability of the business, those places being occupied, those are good things. I will say, though, that some of the challenges that we've seen are For example, with Simons, they've expanded. They've now gone to four store locations, and I think there has been a tension on their network around quality at those stores. And so the role that we've played is to try to continue to amplify resident feedback to the store owners to make sure that they're doing their due diligence around quality at those stores. I would note that we've kind of learned from that process, and I think what's different with what's going on in East Cleveland compared to Buckeye is that in Buckeye, the grocery store emerged out of a crisis. Giant Eagle closed. Residents were understandably upset. Their biggest anchor store closed, their big employer, all that. The pharmacy left, the bank left, et cetera. So residents wanted answers. And so the city of Cleveland did step up to try to fill this gap, but it was, and I would say, under extreme stress to make it happen, compared to what's happening in East Cleveland, where there's been more of a structured process, and you have a community organization that's really been able to develop feedback and priorities in a more democratic fashion, that I think it will be helpful in more of a consistent standard in the city of East Cleveland.
I have a follow-up.
If I could
Go ahead.
Just to add to that briefly, I think that's part of the benefit of the model that was crafted by Councilwoman Stevens related to the phased process here. More structure, less risk, capacity building on the front end so that we can attempt to avoid some of those challenges on the back end. I just want to.
So just thank you. A follow-up, if I may, Chair, about the organization itself. Is this formed, and maybe I missed this, specific to this model, or have they been around for other issues? And a little bit about the history of the
Sure.
organization, if I could.
If we could bring True up. There you go.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So NOAA is, we have become a neighborhood organization based in East Cleveland to address issues of equity in an organized way. We start off as a community organizing agency. And so like the history of our work in East Cleveland, I actually came to the organization 08, 09, right after the Obama election, that kind of thing. But like really building trying to take advantage of that, a lot of the passion that's in the community to make things better, using organizing principles to sort of like direct people into more responsible ways to address solutions within our community. And some of the things that we initially started off with, we start off with a listening campaign, but particularly around vacant and abandoned properties. And so we were the organization that basically did a listening campaign through the community and really devised a solution to address vacant and abandoned properties within East Cleveland. And one of our signature campaign wins were around really helping the community realize the opportunity to create a formalized relationship with the Cuyahoga County Land Bank as a partner to add capacity to the community of East Cleveland so that we can, in a systematic way, address vacant and abandoned properties and eradicate them from our community. And so that right there was a catalyst for a strategy in the community where we began a strategic demolition approach where we looked at, one, of course, stabilizing neighborhoods within our community. So if there's residents who live on streets and they've been keeping their homes up and everything, but there's vacant abandoned properties on their streets and everything, that if we directed resources to those properties, then we can stabilize those neighborhoods, those streets. And then a second part of that strategy was to look at places within East Cleveland that is most opportune for development, that if we concentrated a lot of demolition dollars in those areas, then we can really begin to market our community for economic development, like revitalization. And over the last 10 years, we've implemented that strategy, supported city leadership and city government to actually support that strategy. And now we have a lot of opportunity around development in East Cleveland. I'm sure that that a lot of the council persons up here, Cheryl Stevens, who started off with the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, was a tremendous partner with the community of East Cleveland that engaged our community residents and really put our priorities forth and everything. That was work being done by organizing everyday people to look at more productive, because I'm sure you know that there's a way where that thing can go, that passion and that frustration can spiral off the wrong way. But we really galvanize residents and created like a learning sort of like environment for residents so that we can begin to collectively come together and have productive conversations and implement productive solutions, strategies to those solutions. And so we've done many other campaign work within the community of East Cleveland. We approached the Cleveland Clinic when they were closing the hospital, and basically instead of just going and saying, okay, you're bad and that kind of stuff, but really sitting down and saying, okay, what does it mean to be a responsible responsible corporate citizen within the community of East Cleveland? And those discussions pretty much led to payment of lieu of taxes to the community of East Cleveland around $8 million, and while maybe about $12 million towards demolition around the hospital itself and that kind of thing, which here again provided another space for us to market for development for the community of East Cleveland. We also of late, under the new administration, who's actually started off as a volunteer for NOAA, organized maybe roughly about 80% of the community and neighborhood groups, and sort of like created sort of like a model of participatory governance where residents basically organize themselves, surveys every street by street. We aggregated that data into spreadsheets and basically met with our administration to prioritize community improvements in our neighborhood. Now, around 2015, 16, we began to transition because one of the things that we realized was, sort of like working to improve the social aspect of our community was not enough. We needed to be able to also influence the physical aesthetic of our community as well. So that's why we transitioned into a community development department, which while at the same time sort of like keeping the foundation of our community centered at, as far as listening to community and having them to be the foundation of our organization. And so, a lot of things transitioned during that. A lot of things transpired during that time. But for the most part, we just came out of a strategic planning process that was funded by the Cleveland Foundation, who's one of our biggest donors, contributors to our organization, to actually build out and become a full-on community development corporation. We also, with the help and consultation of Cheryl Stevens, our councilwoman, built a relationship with the National Development Council, which I've also been taking advantage of their training courses that's happening through the county. And we're looking to have them as being partners to help us go through this technical assistance process to really learn how to be a development corporation. Also, we are in partnership with LISC, which is the Local Initiative Support Corporation. They're CDFI. They used to be in Cleveland, but then left, but now they're coming back and everything, where they're back. And we're actually getting capacity assistance from them as far as staffing to really build our organization to become a community development corporation in East Cleveland. And so all that being said, I think that we're in a really good position right now to actually serve our community. We have community support from community residents. We brought some along with us. And I also like to just give a shout out to Roger Sykes and Terry Allen at the County Board of Health, who've been really tried and true partners as we've been basically preaching this message around like equity throughout Cuyahoga County, really addressing equity issues in East Cleveland. But we hope that the model that we're building right now will be something that we can incorporate and sort of like just be thought leaders around to incorporate throughout the whole region of Cuyahoga County. And so I don't know if you have any other questions, but.
Okay. No, thank you so much. That's really informative. Just to follow up, if I can, where do you have an office set up yet?
So we've been in operation since '97, but we've been East Cleveland based since 2007, and so we have an office right Roslyn and Euclid.
Okay.
We're right in the community of East Cleveland. I'm an East Cleveland resident as well, and that's one of the things I also think is important because in all the initiative that goes forth as far as like helping the community, you help the community best when you show the community how to help itself. And that's one of the things I can appreciate with our councilwoman, Cheryl Stevens, really helping us to sort of like redirect, because we were just looking at a policy, just for the county to have a policy, but she says, why not, let's do this thing with you guys and build the policy around like the work that we do together and everything. And so I'm an East Cleveland resident. I enjoy the work I do. It's my job to actually figure out better strategies and better how to increase the quality of life of residents in the community that I live in as well. And then like the organization itself is comprised of everyday people who never thought they would be in council chambers talking about this type of stuff, never thought that it would be a possibility for us to organize to actually bring something like this to our community and everything. And so it's brought a lot of hope and vitality to our community, and we appreciate that.
Okay, and lastly, if I can, Mr. Chair, so where do your residents shop? Where's the grocery? What's the closest grocery? They had the food co-op, which is gone now, University Circle. What's left? Where do they shop?
So one of the things that we did, because we had a collaboration with Lyft to sort of like one of the things we're going to do is sort of like do like a bridge program, sort of like solve the problem around food access until we can actually address it, in a more permanent way, is to sort of like subsidize rides to grocery stores. And so we did a survey with community residents. I believe about 100 residents were at a particular community meeting that we had to kind of figure out like where the grocery stores were. And I think one of the number one spots was Aldi's. And then after that, it was Mark's on Mayfield, and then it was Dave's, and then then Walmart. So those are the top four places that we thought. But one of the things that I think one of the community residents and like I said, I got community residents here.
Sorry to interrupt, but Dave's is the new Dave's. Is that right?
No,
No.
It's the one at Severance.
It's the one at Severance.
Okay.
It's the Severance, just proximity. And but one of the things that I think that like we're excited about, because and when we were articulating sort of like we had a public meeting, about 300 people in April 15th last year, and we were arguing the case of why this is important. And I'd just like to share this one quote out of a report, History Matters, that was done looking at like structural racism and classism and how that sort of like shaped economic development and policies that sort of like were supposed to build communities over 100 years ago. And it said that that policies are express representation of our values and everything. And so out of that, we came to understand, okay, well, if this represents our values that we have now, then we need to change. And we're excited for County Council actually making that effort to do that in all the initiatives that they support, not just what we're actually going to support now, but some of the values so we built a value statement around like the type of things that we would like to see within a project and a policy that the county supports. And basically it's around accountability, high quality, and economic pathways for community. And so we definitely want accountability to whoever the operator is and everything. And we definitely want high quality because, when you look at the maps, there's definitely health disparities and basically life expectancies that are short and dependent on your zip code and that kind of thing. But the other piece that we can appreciate that I think is maybe a little bit different, well, a lot different than some of the other projects that have gone forth, is the economic pathways. And I think that's what makes this stand out from all the other projects that had happened, because what you're doing right here is you're supporting a locally born organization that's community resident led, that has the ability to touch community in a way that we've had. That, I mean, when we talk about NOAA, I mean, I'm sure if you ask any individual over there in this corner over there, they say, I am NOAA, and we are East Cleveland and everything. And so you've given us the ability to be able to like create that economic pathway by actually implementing our project ourselves. And I think that's powerful.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilman Miller?
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Seren, do we have an estimate on what the typical capital cost would be for the construction of a grocery store, and of that cost, what would the typical gap in the funding stack be that there might need to be public support for?
I do not have that information readily available, but I can do some research for you and get that to you. I'll make a note of it.
And can you provide, there was a fair amount of discussion earlier about the Euclid store and the success that they have. Can you say a little bit about how well they're doing on Buckeye?
I'm not privy to their sales numbers. The success that I was focused on, I think, was the process initially to create the store and make it happen. So I do not know their specific sales numbers for that store.
So, whose store went in there? What?
Simon's.
Simon's, okay. So,
Yeah, Simon's, once they did the Euclid project, they expanded to that Buckeye location as well.
and there was a reference earlier to automatic shopping carts. How is an automatic shopping cart different from any other shopping cart?
That's a good question. I guess Roger Sykes, if you could answer that question for me.
Councilperson Miller, just meaning the shopping carts. So across from the Euclid supermarket, there's a big senior housing complex, Euclid Hill Villa, and so there's a lot of seniors that are shopping at that Simon's, and so it's just the automatic carts where you can just sit down in them and cruise them around the store when you're shopping. So, and a lot of residents prioritize that and wanted that.
Okay, thank you. And final question, can you either of you explain what we see as the steps in the process going forward to bring about the East Cleveland development?
Sure. So from a sort of 20,000-foot level, the first step is a question of capacity building. So this would provide some funding for operational support for the organization, so that they could potentially expand their reach within the community. And then additionally, and I think very importantly, the technical assistance piece and the development training piece, which would allow that organization to increase its own ability to perform these development activities. So that would be the first step, and be in collaboration with, as mentioned earlier, National Development Council, LISC. And just for reference, I've been going through the National Development Council training on business credit analysis, real estate development, and that kind of thing. And the information that's provided, the technical information that's provided, I think, is extremely valuable and will help someone become a practitioner of sort of public sector, nonprofit sector assistance to real estate development and economic development within a community. So that's the first step, is building that capacity in the community, in the organization, so that they can do that heavy lifting on their own. And the second stage is really that planning piece. So this would be finding out more information, more detailed information about where, how, and how successful a grocery store could be in East Cleveland, sort of what supports would be necessary in order to make sure that it's successful. That would be the feasibility study, market studies, site selection information, even the community inclusion work, the design, preliminary design work for what a grocery store in East Cleveland might look like, and how it would interact with the community that surrounds it. And then that final stage would be the larger stage, and you have to get to the final stage. So you have to pass through the first two initial stages and find success there before you can feel comfortable moving on to that final stage, which is the development and construction of the grocery store itself.
Mr. Chairman, to Khalil, what would be a reasonable case scenario as to how long to get a full-service grocery store under construction in East Cleveland?
That is a good question that I don't think any of us necessarily know a precise answer to, and part of that is because of the stages. The part of the reason for the stages is to build the capacity. Then the question is, how much capacity do we need to build before we feel comfortable moving on to the next stage? How long does the training take? How many people are we planning to train? So, how long does the feasibility study take? Those sorts of things that would, depending on the answers to those questions, that adjusts when construction might even start. Then additionally, you have to attract other partners, other funding partners, whether it's, actual loans from sort of an NDC type organization or grant funding from the Cleveland Foundation or Gun Foundation or any other of the foundations that assist in this type of work. So I think it's sort of up in the air, but the sort of the first step dictates the steps afterward. So I don't know that I could provide a clear answer on sort of a timeline for the end of construction at this point.
Councilwoman Stevens would like to
This is
add.
Thank you. To my council colleague, this is all dependent on how quickly NOAA can get through the first two stages. Training capacity, and when I first talked to Travell, he has been tremendous. I talked about him understanding how a business operates, how you finance different things, how real estate works, and those key elements. And I was also talking at the same time, simultaneously, to staff about finding capacity building money. And I specifically talked about two kinds of training. One I had a bias toward, the National Development Council, and Travell went out on his own and started taking the National Development classes. So he's willing to extend himself to find a way to finance pieces and to learn about doing things, since I was so strong on the first one. And in the time that he's been dealing with National Development Council, they told him they would help too. So he's finding other sources to partner with us. And I also have before you a draft resolution. I wanted us to discuss it first. And hopefully at the next meeting of this committee, it might be a full resolution if I can get the support of my council colleagues. But really this can move as fast as Travell and his group can help us get to the next stage.
Well, I would just say that I think the problems that East Cleveland has had on a variety of fronts has been a very serious challenge in Cuyahoga County, and that success in creating this new grocery store, especially if generated largely from internal capacity within the community, it would have a transformative effect, not only for East Cleveland, but for the county as a whole, that we can take on these equity challenges and make some real progress. So I just think we should give it priority attention and do anything that we can do from our end to help be a good partner.
So, the chair to my colleague, one of the things I learned in my almost 30 years of service across this country in community and economic development is when we build capacity so that it is there and they own the knowledge and the skill sets, those of us who are flying at 35,000 miles or feet above the ground, who stop and help occasionally, we may still need to coach occasionally, but they own it. They help it live after we come back downtown and go on to our next project. And so the more often we can build capacity and help them own it, really own each of the steps and own selection of the right vendor so that they will have a supermarket who will always provide with them with the kinds of things they really need rather than stock the wrong things on the shelves, then we have really done them the right kind of service, and we have been better public servants for helping them own it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President?
Yes. Just finally for today, I really appreciate the work that the councilperson has been putting into this now for a couple of years at least now, and also the work that Khalil Surin has done for us over time around these issues. And I really recognize the power of this, the indigenous CDC and this model. I think this is really, a classic example of why this committee was formed in the first place, and its ability to attempt to address the kinds of issues that many times don't get enough attention because it's not a function of county government in many ways to be involved at the street level in a way that we can be is in this new form of government in a way that was not likely in the past. So, I'm very, very supportive of this effort as it moves forward.
Thank you. And I know my colleagues may not have this, but Council Stevens does have a draft, which we all have an opportunity to see. But just briefly, it supports the creation of a community development fund through casino revenue dollars in an amount of $25,000 for NOAA for the benefit of East Cleveland's support of their developmental model. And this dollars will specifically be for Stage 1, Community Development Partner Capacity Building in the city of East Cleveland. And it would certainly have my support. When I hear this, I just hear the story in my head of Stone Soup, where a man who was hungry, had a need, he came to a town, and every door he knocked on, no one gave him anything. So he goes in the center of town, puts a big pot of water, drops a stone in, starts stirring, says he's making stone soup. And the water's boiling, and he makes it sound like something great is happening. And then people start coming out and say, what's going on? I'm making stone soup, but it could use a little something. And he said, well, I've got some carrots. Well, sure, put them in. Somebody else, I got an onion. Okay, throw that. I got a chicken. And then next thing you know, he's got the best stone soup going. And that is how a CDC, as I see it, starts, taking that ownership from the beginning. And all we're doing is putting in, with this draft, that first carrot in. And you have the capacity, and I've worked with you and talked with you over the years, so I know what East Cleveland has, and you certainly have the support of County Council, and you're as a sponsor of you in your growth, and you certainly can use that as you continue to grow on what you're doing to support East Cleveland. So again, we just want to thank you all for coming out today and for all the participation today. Do you have any closing comments or thoughts?
I'd just like to say a special thanks for County Council, and particularly Cheryl Stevens, who took really have been a champion for us doing the work to actually get us to this particular point. And I just believe that, like, one of our mottos, it's like our mission statement for organization. It says, invest in people, develop leaders, transform communities. And you guys are a direct example of that. And thank you so much for your support.
If nothing else holds our attention, our meeting is now adjourned.